This is True Crime Case Files. In July of 2023, a blended family from Arizona planned a short birthday trip meant to heal old wounds. Instead, it ended with a brutal killing inside a Flagstaff hotel room. The victim was a 19-year-old young woman with plans for a medical career and a future just beginning. The killer was someone already inside her family circle. This is the case of Brian E. Pierce. Brian E. Pierce was 19 years old and lived in Gilbert, Arizona, a fast-growing suburb southeast of Phoenix. In July of 2023, she had just finished her first year of community college, completing basic prerequisite classes like anatomy, psychology, and English composition. She balanced school with a part-time job at a local coffee shop, where she worked early morning shifts and saved tips in a mason jar labeled nursing school. Bryony's long-term goal was clear. She wanted to become a pediatric nurse and dreamed of working in a neonatal intensive care unit, caring for premature and medically fragile babies. Her phone reflected that dream. It was filled with photos of tiny infants she followed on nursing forums and social media pages. She saved posts about feeding tubes, incubators, and NICU success stories. In the notes app on her phone, she wrote short reminders to herself, including one that appeared often: "Be gentle, be steady." Friends said she repeated those words when she felt stressed or unsure. Those who knew Bryony described her as empathetic but restless. She was the kind of person who noticed when someone was quiet and checked in on them. But she also struggled to sit still emotionally. At times, she was intensely focused. She could study for hours, memorize medical terms, and plan her future in detail. Other times, she acted on impulse, staying up late, changing plans suddenly, or talking about moving away without warning. Bryony paid close attention to her appearance and personal style. She liked oversized thrift store sweaters, canvas tote bags, and iced coffee with too much cream. She carried a pink stethoscope keychain on her backpack, joking that it was there for manifestation. She talked often about leaving Gilbert one day, maybe transferring to a larger nursing program, and starting fresh somewhere new. At home, life was strained. Bryony lived with her mother, Karen Pierce, 46, and her stepfather, Mark Pierce, 52. 3 years earlier, Mark's children from a previous marriage had moved in full-time after their mother was diagnosed with cancer. That sudden change shifted the household dynamic. Bryony struggled with the loss of privacy and ongoing conflicts with her step-siblings, especially her stepbrother, Elridge Pierce, who was 17. By the summer of 2023, tension inside the home had been building for months. Bryony argued frequently with her mother about rules, trust, and independence. She talked to friends about moving out, finding roommates, and starting over. The family trip to northern Arizona was meant to calm things down. It was planned as a short getaway to celebrate Bryony's 19th birthday and visit the Grand Canyon. Karen hoped the trip would help reset the family after a difficult year. For Bryony, it felt like both a celebration and a turning point. She believed this birthday marked the start of her real life. On the morning of July 14, 2023, Flagstaff was already warming under a clear summer sky. Tourists filled the roads heading toward the Grand Canyon, and hotels across the city were busy with checkouts and room cleanings. At approximately 9:40 a.m., a housekeeper named Rosa Martinez began her routine on an upper floor of a mid-range Flagstaff hotel near the highway. Earlier that morning, the Pierce family had left the hotel to tour the Grand Canyon. They believed Bryony was still asleep. She had mentioned feeling tired the night before, and no one wanted to wake her on her birthday. The plan was to let her rest and meet up later in the day. Her room door was closed, and everything appeared normal when the family left. Rosa followed standard procedure. She knocked on the door and announced herself. When there was no response, she unlocked the door with her staff key card and stepped inside. The room looked quiet at first. The curtains were drawn partway, keeping the space dim. The bed was unmade, and the air smelled faintly metallic. As Rosa began her cleaning routine, she noticed dark stains on the carpet near the foot of the bed. Thinking it might be spilled wine or soda, she leaned closer. That was when she pulled back the bed skirt to check underneath. What she saw caused her to freeze. Blood was pooled on the carpet, thick and dark. Beneath the bed, she saw part of a human arm and strands of hair pressed against the floor. Bryony Pierce's body had been dragged under the bed, partially hidden from view. Rosa screamed and stumbled backward. She dropped her cleaning supplies and ran into the hallway, shouting for help. Other hotel staff came out of nearby rooms, alarmed by her cries. Rosa was shaking and crying, struggling to explain what she had seen. A hotel supervisor quickly called 911. Rosa was handed a phone and tried to speak with the dispatcher herself. Her voice was unsteady. She told the operator that there was a young woman under the bed and that there was blood everywhere. She said she believed the guest was dead and begged police to come quickly. Hotel staff cleared the hallway and kept guests away from the room. Within minutes, the busy hotel atmosphere shifted. Tourists waiting for elevators fell silent. Some guests were told to return to their rooms. Others watched as police and emergency vehicles began to arrive outside. The Pierce family was still at the Grand Canyon when the call came in. What they thought was a normal summer morning, filled with sightseeing plans and birthday photos, had already turned into a crime scene back in Flagstaff. The discovery of Bryony's body marked the end of the trip and the beginning of a homicide investigation that would soon reveal a far darker story. Flagstaff police officers arrived at the hotel within minutes of the 911 call. By mid-morning on July 14, 2023, the parking lot was filled with patrol cars, an ambulance, and crime scene vans. Summer tourism was at its peak, and officers worked quickly to block off part of the hotel while trying to keep curious guests away. Yellow tape was placed across the hallway, and the room where Bryony Pierce was found became an active crime scene. Lead investigators were Detective Aaron Delgado and Detective Melissa Klein. Delgado was known among coworkers as calm and careful, the kind of detective who spoke softly and took detailed notes. Klein was more direct and highly focused, often spotting small details others missed. Both detectives understood immediately that the scene pointed to a violent and personal attack. Inside the hotel room, the damage was severe. Blood soaked into the carpet near the bed and splashed onto the sheets and balls. The mattress was pushed out of place. Bryony Pierce's body had been dragged beneath the bed, with clear blood streaks showing the path. Detectives counted 72 stab wounds across her body. The weapon used was believed to be a hunting knife, based on the size, depth, and shape of the wounds. Medical examiners later confirmed that many of the wounds were delivered after Bryony was already incapacitated. This level of violence showed extreme overkill. To investigators, that suggested rage, obsession, or both. It was not a quick or accidental act. There were no signs of forced entry. The door and lock were intact. Windows were closed and undamaged. This told police that Bryony likely knew her attacker or that the person had authorized access to the room. The murder weapon was not found anywhere in the room or nearby trash bins. Crime scene technicians worked for hours. They photographed every surface, measured blood patterns, and collected samples from the floor, bedding, and bathroom sink. Swabs were taken from door handles, light switches, and the bed frame. Officers searched under furniture and inside drawers for the missing knife. Investigators also focused on digital evidence. Hotel staff provided the electronic key card log, which showed every time the room was accessed. The records were clear. Only key cards assigned to Bryony's family had been used to enter the room. No unknown guests or staff members accessed it during the night. As detectives reviewed the evidence, one detail stood out with painful weight. July 14 was Bryony Pierce's 19th birthday. The room still contained birthday items, including a small gift bag and a folded card on the desk. What was meant to be a celebration had turned into a homicide scene. By early afternoon, police confirmed they were investigating a murder. Detectives believed the killer was someone close to Bryony, someone already inside her family circle. The locked room, the missing weapon, and the level of violence all pointed in that direction. The investigation was just beginning, but the evidence was already narrowing the focus. Karen Pierce was 46 years old at the time of her daughter's death. She worked as a medical billing supervisor for a large healthcare office in the Phoenix metro area. Her job involved long hours, insurance codes, and constant deadlines. In interviews with police, Karen described herself as exhausted but doing her best. Friends and coworkers confirmed she often worked late, checked emails at night, and rarely took time off. Karen told investigators that the year leading up to July 2023 had been one of the hardest periods of her life. Her blended family situation had become tense after her husband's children moved into the home full-time. At the same time, Karen noticed changes in Bryony's behavior. Weeks before the trip to Flagstaff, Karen said she found several empty vodka bottles and a small bag of cocaine hidden in Bryony's dresser. The discovery deeply alarmed her. Karen told police she feared Bryony was spiraling and losing control. She confronted her daughter, which led to loud arguments about trust, independence, and rules inside the house. Karen said she worried Bryony was making risky choices but did not know how to reach her anymore. Karen explained that the northern Arizona trip was her idea. She said she hoped that celebrating Bryony's 19th birthday away from home would help repair their relationship. The plan included sightseeing, family meals, and a visit to the Grand Canyon. Karen believed that time together, away from daily stress, might bring the family closer. After Bryony's body was discovered, Karen became one of the first people questioned by police. Detectives interviewed her at the hotel and later at the police station. During questioning, Karen appeared visibly shaken. She cried often and struggled to finish sentences. Officers noted that she repeatedly asked the same question, whether Bryony had suffered. Karen did not become defensive when asked difficult questions. She spoke openly about her arguments with her daughter and did not deny that their relationship had been strained. She admitted that she had been strict and sometimes harsh, but insisted she never wanted to harm Bryony. She told investigators she loved her daughter deeply and had only wanted to protect her. Police examined Karen's clothing and belongings. There were no blood stains, cuts, or signs of a struggle. Her phone was seized and analyzed. Investigators reviewed her call history, text messages, photos, and location data. Nothing placed Karen in the hotel room at the time of the murder. Her phone activity matched her claim that she had been asleep and later out of the room when the killing occurred. Forensic testing did not find Bryony's blood or DNA on Karen's clothing or personal items. There were no defensive wounds on Karen's hands or arms. Detectives also reviewed hotel surveillance footage and key card records, which did not show Karen entering the room during the critical time window. Throughout the investigation, officers noted Karen's emotional state remained consistent. She appeared genuinely distraught rather than guarded or calculating. She cooperated fully with investigators, signed consent forms, and answered follow-up questions without hesitation. By the end of the initial investigation, police ruled Karen Pierce out as a suspect. While her relationship with Bryony had been strained, there was no physical or digital evidence linking her to the crime. Investigators concluded that Karen was a grieving mother, not the person responsible for her daughter's death. Mark Pierce was 52 years old and worked as a regional construction manager overseeing multiple job sites across Arizona. His work required frequent travel, long hours, and early mornings. Coworkers described him as organized and strict, someone who liked control and clear rules. At home, he often positioned himself as the authority figure, especially after his children moved in full-time. When police began investigating Bryony Pierce's death in July of 2023, Mark quickly became a central focus. Investigators learned that Mark had been living a double life. Phone records and financial data showed he was secretly having an affair with a woman in her early 20s. The relationship raised serious questions about his boundaries, judgment, and views toward young women. Detectives noted the age gap and the secrecy as concerning, especially given the circumstances of the case. More troubling was Mark's admission about the hotel room arrangement. He told police that he and Bryony had shared the same hotel room during the Flagstaff trip. According to Mark, this decision was made to save money and because he did not want Bryony doing drugs and drinking in her room. He claimed he believed close supervision was necessary given recent tensions at home. Investigators found the explanation unusual. Bryony was a 19-year-old adult, and many officers questioned why a stepfather would choose to share a room rather than provide her with privacy. Mark maintained that it was practical and said Karen had agreed to the plan. Mark told police that on the night of July 13, Bryony returned to the room tired. He said she went to bed around midnight. Mark claimed he stayed awake watching television, flipping between cable news and late-night reruns. He said Bryony did not leave the bed again and did not speak much before falling asleep. According to his account, nothing seemed wrong. Investigators pressed Mark on his actions that night. He was the last person known to see Bryony alive. Police questioned him for several hours in a small interview room at the Flagstaff Police Department. Mark remained controlled and measured in his responses, but grew defensive when detectives challenged his story. At one point, investigators raised the theory that Mark's behavior suggested what they described as a Lolita syndrome, an inappropriate fixation on younger women. Mark strongly denied this. He stated firmly that he had no sexual interest in Bryony and said the idea was offensive. He repeated that the room-sharing arrangement had nothing to do with attraction and everything to do with control and safety. Police examined Mark's phone, clothing, and luggage. They searched for blood, cuts, or defensive wounds. They reviewed his text messages, call logs, and location data. His phone showed activity consistent with watching television late at night and brief periods of inactivity during sleep hours. There were no messages to Bryony that suggested inappropriate behavior. However, hotel surveillance footage showed Mark leaving the room briefly around 1:12 a.m. and returning about 10 minutes later. Mark explained this by saying he went outside to smoke and make a quick phone call. At the time, investigators could not confirm or deny this explanation. Despite growing suspicion, police found no physical evidence directly linking Mark to the murder. There was no blood on his clothing, no injuries on his hands, and no murder weapon in his possession. Still, detectives remained uneasy. His affair, the shared room, and his position as the last person to see Bryony alive kept him under close scrutiny. By the end of this phase of the investigation, Mark Pierce had not been cleared. Investigators believed his choices showed poor judgment and troubling boundaries, even if they could not yet prove he was responsible for Bryony's death. On July 16, 2023, just after noon, detectives gathered inside a conference room at the Flagstaff Police Department. Outside, summer skies were clear and bright, and tourists continued to move through the city unaware of the shift happening inside the investigation. Coffee cups, printed timelines, and open laptops covered the table as investigators began reviewing new evidence. The focus was hotel surveillance footage. Technicians had spent days pulling video from hallways, elevators, and exterior cameras. When detectives replayed the footage from the early morning hours of July 14, one detail stood out clearly. At approximately 1:12 a.m., Mark Pierce was seen leaving the hotel room. He walked down the hallway, exited the frame, and returned about 10 minutes later. At first, this appeared significant. Mark had already been under suspicion, and the video confirmed he had left the room during the night. However, forensic evidence soon complicated that theory. Medical examiners reviewed Bryony Pierce's injuries, blood patterns, and body temperature. Their conclusion was firm. Bryony was killed after 2:00 a.m., well after Mark had returned to the room. This new timeline changed everything. If Mark was asleep in the room after 1:22 a.m., he could not have committed the murder unless someone else was involved. Detectives went back to the keycard data. The electronic logs showed that no hotel staff or unknown guests entered the room during the critical time period. Only keycards belonging to family members were used. Investigators now believed someone else had entered the room quietly, without forcing the door, and without being captured clearly on camera. The person likely knew the layout of the room and the sleeping habits of those inside. This realization narrowed the suspect pool dramatically. That same afternoon, the case took another turn. Police received an anonymous call on the department's tip line. The caller did not give a name and spoke only briefly. The message was direct. The caller said investigators should look closely at Bryony's stepbrother, Elridge Pierce. The caller claimed Elridge had been obsessed with Bryony and had made her uncomfortable for months. Detectives took the tip seriously. They documented the call and cross-referenced it with information already gathered. Officers had already heard vague concerns from family members and friends, but the anonymous tip pushed Elridge into sharper focus. Investigators reviewed Elridge's movements during the night. They learned he had been on the trip at the last minute and had access to the hotel room through spare key cards. They also noted his background working at an outdoor sporting goods store, where he handled knives regularly. By the end of July 16, the direction of the investigation had shifted. Mark Pierce remained a person of interest, but the timeline no longer fit him as the sole attacker. The window of time after 2:00 a.m. pointed investigators toward someone younger, quieter, and already inside the family circle. What began as a confusing set of clues was now forming a clearer picture. The twist in the timeline, combined with the anonymous tip, suggested the killer had been hiding in plain sight. Elridge Pierce was 17 years old in July of 2023. He was Mark Pierce's son from a previous marriage and had moved into the family home full-time after his mother became ill with cancer. Elridge joined the Flagstaff trip at the last minute. According to family members, the plan changed shortly before departure, and Elridge ended up coming along and sharing a bed with his father in the hotel room. Elridge worked part-time at an outdoor sporting goods store in the Phoenix area. His job involved stocking shelves, helping customers, and handling camping and hunting equipment. Police learned that Elridge owned several knives, including a hunting blade similar in size and shape to the weapon believed to have been used in Bryony Pierce's murder. One knife from his collection could not be located after the killing. Family members described Elridge as socially awkward and intense. He often struggled in group settings and had difficulty reading social cues. At home, he spent long periods alone in his room and became easily upset when routines changed. He spoke little during family meals but would sometimes fixate on a single topic and talk about it repeatedly. Former classmates told police that Elridge was known as creepy but harmless. They said he made others uncomfortable with awkward comments and intense staring, but no one believed he was capable of violence. Teachers described him as quiet, withdrawn, and emotionally immature for his age. As investigators looked deeper, they discovered troubling behavior. Police obtained Elridge's phone and reviewed his social media activity. On Snapchat, Elridge had sent messages to friends that focused heavily on Bryony. In those messages, he referred to her as the only one who would lick me bleep, my bleeping soulmate, and we're in love, even if she won't admit it yet. The messages showed a clear pattern of obsession. Elridge spoke about Bryony as if they were in a relationship, despite no evidence that Bryony felt the same way. Friends who received the messages did not respond positively, and in some cases, ignored them altogether. Investigators also learned that Bryony had been uncomfortable around Elridge for some time. She had repeatedly asked her mother, Karen Pierce, to keep him away from her. Bryony complained about his behavior, his comments, and his lack of boundaries. Despite these concerns, Elridge continued to have close access to her, including sharing the same hotel room during the trip. Police interviewed Elridge at the Flagstaff Police Department. At first, he appeared calm and cooperative. He answered basic questions and avoided eye contact. His tone was flat, and his posture was stiff. He said little about Bryony and described their relationship as close. As questioning continued, detectives asked about his feelings toward Bryony and his whereabouts during the night of July 13. Elridge became increasingly agitated. His breathing changed, and he began shifting in his seat. He contradicted himself on small details, including when he fell asleep and whether he woke during the night. When confronted with the Snapchat messages, Elridge became defensive. He claimed the messages were jokes and said people misunderstood him. Investigators noted that he minimized his behavior and avoided taking responsibility. Detectives also questioned Elridge about his knives. He admitted owning several but could not explain why one hunting blade was missing. He said he did not know where it was and suggested it might have been misplaced. By the end of the interrogation, police believed Elridge's calm exterior masked deep emotional fixation. The combination of his access to the room, his obsession with Bryony, the missing knife, and the timeline after 2:00 a.m. made him the primary suspect. What had once been dismissed as awkward behavior now appeared far more dangerous. On July 18, 2023, just after 3:30 p.m., detectives brought Elridge Pierce back into an interview room at the Flagstaff Police Department. By this point, investigators had spent days reviewing digital records, forensic reports, and witness statements. The case had narrowed to one person. Police presented Elridge with new evidence. Electronic hotel records showed that a spare key card had been used to enter the hotel room during the early morning hours of July 14, after Mark Pierce had fallen asleep. Surveillance footage placed Elridge in the hallway earlier that night, and investigators could not account for his movements after 2:00 a.m. Detectives also confronted him about the missing hunting knife from his collection. The knife matched the size and wound pattern found on Bryony Pierce's body. Elridge was unable to provide a clear explanation for where the knife had gone. At first, Elridge denied involvement. He sat quietly, staring at the table, giving short answers. As the questioning continued, detectives calmly walked him through the timeline, step by step. They explained how Bryony had been killed after 2:00 a.m. when his father was asleep. They explained the keycard data and the forensic findings. After several hours, Elridge's composure began to break. His voice became strained. He stopped denying outright and started offering explanations. Eventually, he confessed. Elridge told detectives that earlier on the evening of July 13, he tried to talk to Bryony alone. During that conversation, he made sexual comments, telling her he wanted to talk about bleeping me hard. According to Elridge, Bryony laughed at him. She told him he was just a stepbrother and made it clear she did not see him that way. Elridge said Bryony also told him she planned to move out after the trip and cut off contact with the family. She spoke about transferring schools and starting over. To Elridge, this felt like abandonment. In his words, Elridge told police, "If I couldn't have her, nobody would. She was leaving me." According to his confession, after Mark fell asleep, Elridge used a spare key card to enter the hotel room quietly. Bryony was in bed. What followed was a frenzied attack. Elridge stabbed her repeatedly with the hunting knife. The violence was extreme and uncontrolled, driven by obsession and rage. Many of the wounds were inflicted after Bryony was already incapacitated. After the attack, Elridge dragged Bryony's body beneath the bed in an attempt to hide her. He then went to the bathroom, washed blood from his hands, and returned to bed beside his father. He did not seek help. He did not leave the room again. Investigators concluded that Elridge's motive was a delusional fixation. He believed Bryony belonged to him emotionally. He could not tolerate her independence, her rejection, or her plans for a future without him. That rejection, delivered on her 19th birthday, triggered the violence. When officers formally placed Elridge under arrest, he showed little outward reaction. He did not cry or protest. Meanwhile, when Bryony's family was informed of the confession, they broke down in grief. What had begun as a birthday trip meant to celebrate Bryony's future ended with the arrest of someone who had been allowed too close to her. In March of 2025, the trial of Elridge Pierce took place in Coconino County Superior Court in Flagstaff, Arizona. Nearly 2 years had passed since Bryony Pierce was killed, but public interest in the case remained high. By this time, true crime podcasts, online forums, and local news outlets closely followed each day of testimony. Outside the courthouse, reporters gathered each morning as temperatures still dipped below freezing in the early hours, a reminder that winter had not fully released northern Arizona. The prosecution was led by Dana Whitlock, age 41. Whitlock was known for her calm, structured courtroom style. She spoke clearly and avoided emotional language. In her opening statement, she told the jury that the case was about obsession, entitlement, and control. She walked jurors through the timeline, the hotel key card data, the forensic evidence, and Elridge's own confession. Whitlock emphasized the extreme violence of the attack, pointing out that Bryony had been stabbed 72 times, many after she was already incapacitated. She argued this showed intent, not confusion. The defense attorney was Paul Renshaw, age 58, a longtime public defender with a quiet but persistent manner. Renshaw did not deny that Elridge killed Bryony. Instead, he focused on Elridge's mental state. The defense argued that Elridge was suffering from a psychotic break at the time of the murder, caused by smoking too much marijuana. Renshaw told the jury that Elridge was young, emotionally immature, and unable to fully understand his actions during that night. Defense experts testified about marijuana-induced psychosis, explaining how heavy use could lead to paranoia, delusions, and loss of control. Prosecutors challenged this claim, pointing out that Elridge had planned his actions, used a key card, cleaned himself afterward, and returned to bed. They argued these steps showed awareness and intent, not a break from reality. Throughout the trial, Bryony's family sat in the front rows of the courtroom. Karen Pierce attended most days, but often left during graphic testimony. When photos of the crime scene were shown, she covered her face and cried. Other family members held hands and leaned on one another for support. Elridge remained mostly expressionless during the proceedings. He rarely looked at the jury. When he did speak, his voice was flat and emotionless. After several days of deliberation, the jury returned a verdict. Elridge Pierce was found guilty of first-degree murder. The courtroom fell silent as the verdict was read. Karen sobbed quietly. Some family members bowed their heads. The judge sentenced Elridge to life in prison with the possibility of parole after several decades, as required under Arizona law for a juvenile offender convicted of first-degree murder. Reactions were mixed. Some felt the sentence was too lenient given the brutality of the crime. Others believed it was a fair balance between accountability and the law. For Bryony's family and friends, the verdict brought a measure of justice, but it did not bring peace. The loss of Bryony remained permanent. By March of 2025, life had changed dramatically for everyone connected to Bryony Pierce's murder. Her mother, Karen Pierce, moved out of Gilbert, Arizona, and downsized to a small apartment in a quieter part of the city. She sold most of her belongings from the family home and tried to simplify her life. Friends said she spent long hours volunteering at a local women's center and focused on rebuilding her emotional health. Karen rarely spoke about the past but maintained close contact with those who had supported her through the trial. Mark Pierce, Bryony's stepfather, divorced Karen shortly after the trial concluded. He moved out of state and took a position managing construction projects in northern Colorado. Neighbors and former colleagues said he appeared withdrawn and focused entirely on work. Despite the divorce, he remained legally responsible for supporting Elridge financially until the court decided otherwise, and he kept a low public profile to avoid media attention. Elridge Pierce, now incarcerated, was serving a life sentence with the possibility of parole decades in the future. At 19, he was transferred to a state juvenile adult correction facility that specialized in housing young offenders. Reports from the facility indicated he was quiet, mostly keeping to himself, and occasionally met with a court-appointed psychologist. He was participating in educational programs but had limited contact with the outside world. Detectives Aaron Delgado and Melissa Klein, who had led the investigation, continued their work in Flagstaff, focusing on violent crime cases across northern Arizona. The Pierce case remained one of the most intense and public investigations of their careers. Both officers reflected privately on the challenges of the case, including the complexity of a blended family, the subtle warning signs, and the importance of careful forensic work. In the community, Bryony's memory lived on. Her friends and classmates established a scholarship fund for nursing students in her name. The fund helped local high school graduates pursuing degrees in pediatric nursing, particularly those interested in neonatal intensive care. Several nursing forums also highlighted her story, with members leaving messages about empathy, care, and the importance of watching for warning signs in blended families. The Pierce family home, once a center of tension and grief, remained empty for months after the trial. Neighbors reported seeing a moving company take furniture and personal items away, leaving the house quiet and still. For friends and family, the summer of 2023 and the events at the Flagstaff Hotel remained a painful memory, but life slowly moved forward. By early 2025, while Bryony's death continued to impact everyone involved, Karen focused on healing, Mark on work, detectives on justice for other victims, and Bryony's friends on honoring her dream of helping children. The community remembered her for her empathy, her energy, and her ambition, hoping that her story would inspire caution, awareness, and care for young people in blended families. Bryony Pierce was killed on the day meant to celebrate her future. Her story is a reminder that danger does not always come from strangers. Sometimes it is already inside the room. Hey, true crime case solvers interested in more real-life murder mysteries, be sure to like and subscribe to our channel. And do you have any thoughts about this case or have a case of your own you'd like us to investigate? Leave us a comment. Stay safe, true crime case solvers.